Hello, everyone, and welcome back to OneSoccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming. I am joined by my colleague, Alex Gonke-Ruzik. It's a very early morning for both of us, mostly for Alex. I woke up around 5:45. Alex was probably more towards 3:15. Am I right, Alex? Right around there?
2:45.
2:45. Okay, the guy came up very early, but we are here today to discuss Canada getting bounced out from the FIFA Women's World Cup in the group stage after a 4-0 defeat against Australia. Not the result we wanted to talk about today, Alex. Obviously, the first match was a tough one, 0-0, followed up by a pretty decent performance against Ireland. Put us in a pretty good position, just needed a point to get through. But at the end of the day, the hosts were by far the superior team. There's a lot of takeaways. Twitter is not a happy place right now. So, Alex, I'm going to give it to you. Where do you want to start with today's match?
I mean, where to start? I mean, I think really the biggest thing is just the magnitude of the match. Just Canada must-win game, draw or win, and they're guaranteed to be in. They're playing the co-host Australia against a strong Australian crowd. They were in control of their destiny. It was everything you wanted heading into that last match, and just the fact that you come out and lose 4-0 in a magnitude of that match, that doesn't get much worse than that, really. And I think that was the big surprise. You heard all the chatter heading into it about how Canada was looking forward to it, how they felt they'd get the most out of themselves in this big game, and it's just that was probably one of the flattest, one of the sloppiest overall performances from back to front that we've seen, and just in a match of that magnitude with the world watching, it's not the time to do it, that's for sure.
No, it's not. Jessie Fleming, I believe. I'm gonna try to quote it right off the top of my head. I think she said, what did she say? It was like, not the time. I can't remember what she said. What did she say? What did Jessie Fleming say? It was some along the lines of, this was not the time to perform this way. I butchered that, but she spoke after the pregame, and she's like, it was a big night, big occasion, and we didn't live up for it. But I thought I could think of it right off the bat. But what we are going to start with today, right now, Alex, is the starting 11, because that was one of my quick takeaways even before the game started. You and I, after every single game, have went to take a look at the next match and what starting 11 we wanted to see. And I'm just trying to think of our projected one. We had Lacassin. I think we got 2 or 3 wrong, didn't we? In our projected one, we had. I know we had Schmidt in.
Schmidt and Lacasse, and I mean, I think pretty much the 11 was surprising, to say the least, because again, like we'd mentioned after each game, it felt like there's always a player kind of suffering in this formation, to use that word. Like there's always felt like there's a peg or two out of place, and we're kind of saying, okay, then put the players that fit this formation a bit more. It was like, on paper is a midfield of, Sophie Schmidt, Quinn, and Jessie Fleming better than a midfield of Julia Grosso, Fleming, and Quinn? No. But if you're going to continue to play the double pivot, Sophie Schmidt was the way to go. And that was a big surprise not to see her in. She showed across 2 games that she could make an influence on the match and bring something. Did it with Chloe Lacasse. Canada's looking for a spark up front. Lacasse brought that in 2 games. We wondered, okay, it's a big game, but why not give her a shot just to, create something up front? And just it was all too predictable. I think another thing is kind of throughout, even before the tournament, I've been warning of, Canada's build-up patterns being perhaps a bit too predictable, a bit too easy to press. They try to build out with 4. And a double pivot. Teams can match that very easily by just playing a 4-4-2. Can kind of go 1v1 against that 6. And Australia nailed that from perfection, pretty much from the minute 1. They're like, we're sitting in a 4-4-2, and Australia is a team that loves to press high. They love to engage the other team's center backs, and the fact that they sat off and almost looked at Canada like, beat us, like, out pass us, out dribble us, out play us, and Canada just kind of walked right into that trap. It was just all too predictable. And I think the fact that they kind of rolled out the same 11 from last game that struggled massively in the first half, you can't help but look at that and be like, well, they kind of, did it to themselves in that regard.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I saw the starting 11, I mean, it's hard to not want to see Christine Sinclair in there, as well as Quinn and Gross. I mean, I think Quinn was going to start regardless, but like we talked about in that 4-2-3-1, Schmidt, she needed to be in there. Sinclair just, I mean, that front three offered almost nothing. Didn't matter what the combination seemed to be this game in the first half, second half, whatever that front three was, that we just weren't able to do really anything. And deadly on the counter was Australia. And it was just super disappointing to see. And Alex, I'm going to quickly bring up your full-time takeaways here, and we're going to go over them, and then I'll bring up mine, because there was a lot of them, and I just feel pretty just down in the dumps right now. I'm not gonna lie. It was a tough performance. There's a lot of issues going, off the field that we could probably touch on at some point, but let's go point by point here, Alex, to take a look at your takeaways after the match. The score says it all. Rough 90 for Canada. Deserved, disappointing elimination. Let's talk big picture for those first 2 points. This was a very disappointing result after what was a very impressive Olympics, winning gold. Where does Canada go from here? What's next? Is it time to say goodbye to some of the old guard, those players that are, I mean, I know it's Schmidt's last one. I believe it's going to be Sinclair's potentially even last ever match. I mean, hopefully she'll get a send off, but where does Canada go from here? How do you spin this to the fans and the viewers right now to try to take something positive away from what was a disappointing World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's clear is that just sitting here and watching Canada's games versus, watching the other teams, is that the world's catching up quick. I think that's kind of a big takeaway. I think, there's some first-time debutants at this World Cup who are going out here and giving some established teams some problems. There's, teams from South America looked good. There's been some teams from Asia, some teams from Africa. All this to say that the world is changing. I think for Canada was interesting. I think after 2019, there were a lot of calls for some veterans to perhaps, they're a bit leaned on heavily in that 2019 tournament. They kind of struggled. That was, and then really for the Olympics, I mean, credit has to be given at the time. Priestman comes in, completely, shifts things around, leans on some of those veterans, but just a few, injects the right amount of new faces around them. She got that balance right. But I think as this tournament went on, she kind of stayed with that. And I think what's key is, especially in the sport, you see it globally, is that 6-12 months is a lot. It changes. I think the best one was, look at Morocco, for example. Like Morocco, Canada played them in October, I want to say, or even, it was October. Canada beat them 4-0. Canada was missing a few regulars. It was, walk in the park. It was, they slept walk through Morocco. Maybe 8 months later, Morocco's out there winning a World Cup game the other day against South Korea, a top team, a solid team that Canada drew 0-0 early in the year, because Korea is a very good outfit. And I think it just shows that over 6 to 12 months, everything is changing. It's evolving. It's what's clear is it's becoming a very young player's game as well. Like you're looking at some of these stories like Colombia with Linda Caicedo, who's 18 out here just completely running the show. You had Dumornay on Haiti, who's 19. There's a few examples of some of these young players kind of leading the way for some of these upstart teams. And for Canada, the fact that they just kind of didn't give the keys to some of their new players, I'd say that's the big thing that they'll need to give going forward. Because I can't say, if you looked at this tournament and be like, well, this was Julia Gross's tournament. No, she didn't really get played in her natural position. The defenders, it didn't end up being their tournament. We didn't see a lot of these youngsters that are there for Canada. So I think really the big thing is just beginning that evolution, because Canada has talent. I think that's the one thing that's nice about this, is that you're not sitting here being like, oh, like this is a problem where Canada, it's a lack of talent for Canada. It's more how you put that talent together. And that's something where they're going to have to get it together quick, because they played Jamaica in September in 2 very must-win games. And if they want to play at the Olympics, so will they have enough time to prepare? Who knows? But I think there's talent there, and I think they have to focus on getting that next generation, really making this Fleming, Grosso. Heck, even you look at someone like Olivia Smith, who came on today, Amanda Allen, some of these next players, because there's some good young talent. Heck, I've been in my fair share of League One BC games this year. You look at League One Ontario, there's a good crop of players who are about 15 to 20 that are coming through right now. It's not a talent issue. It's so much, getting these players pro opportunities, and then at the national team level, integrating these young players. I think what's clear is when you're sitting here you're like, oh, Sophie Schmidt was missed today, et cetera, et cetera. Sophie Schmidt, very, key piece of this national team for so long, but you can't sit there and be like, oh yeah, she's missed at this stage, right? Like at that point, you kind of the transition plan has gone wrong, safe to say. And the fact Schmidt's retiring, right? Like that's someone you can't rely on anymore. And the fact that you're sitting there, well, there's not kind of a natural placement, but behind her at the moment, they got to work on getting all those pieces together.
Now I'm going to pick up right there because I know that there's a lot of frustration in the chat and on Twitter and pretty much all social media, but I like what you said, the wrong transition, because like you just mentioned, Sophie Schmidt for this tournament, if you're going to go all in playing this way, then yes, use her, utilize her for her last legs with the national team. But now it's time to maybe flip a script. If you don't have a player to directly replace Sophie Schmidt going forward, maybe it's time for Bev to take a look at the positions, the players that she has available, and change the tactics going forward. Alex, I don't got to tell you, you've been screaming for a back three for a while. Maybe there's something she can do going forward to integrate this new crop, build around, like you said, your Grosso, your Fleming, use Hoytema in a type of way. But I've seen a lot of comments already talking about valuing loyalty. And it's the reason I think that we saw a Christine Sinclair kind of shoehorse into a system that doesn't really work for her. And it was disappointing because, I mean, obviously Christine Sinclair's had such a glorious career. You can't even kind of describe it, but she was not built for this system the way that this team played. And despite the substitutions, and I think that really goes into it, is when I looked at the starting 11, Alex, and I think you probably thought the same way, you're probably like, maybe not what we thought. And 4 substitutions at halftime. Like clearly something wasn't going right. She had to adjust and threw everything. And I mean, the second half wasn't much better than the first, in my opinion. So she didn't get it right from the beginning. And Bev tried to create things, but I'm hopeful going forward that she can grab these young players, change the system up a bit, find a way that they can fit and go forward. But speaking of that, I want to go over to a couple players. I can't see that where that one comment went, but one was on Jordan Hoytema. A lot of question marks around her in her tournament. A lot of people are saying she was pretty disappointing. She was tried up front as a number 9. She was pushed out wide. What did you make of her overall tournament, and where do you want to see her play going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of also a theme that goes with a lot of young players and or just players in general. I mean, we mentioned that Canada had some talented young players. I think Hoytema was someone where, this would have been a tournament where you expect her to really kind of break out. She's still only, freshly, I think, just turned 22. By far not an old player. Someone, especially given she went pro so early. She really found her feet lately for Oil Rain, and we just didn't see that same system, that same Hoytema replicated for Canada. And I think really for Canada, I think it's as much, where they're playing going forward, it's just as much finding the right system for them. I think, again, we mentioned it was just Hoytema for club. Like, you have to almost recognize that she's not, say, you look at her 5'11", 6-foot frame, and you're like, oh yeah, she's this big, bruising, fatiguing, back to goal target player. No, she's not. She's more of a, finesse, get the ball to feet, get her those touches, get her running in behind, get her that service in box, but off more early crosses, right? Not so much the get it to the byline and stand it up for her and go ask her to dunk on someone and brute force the way in. And I think, for example, for her, it's as much okay if I want Canada, if she's going to be the starting 9 going forward, then find a way to build the system that kind of suits her in that regard. Heck, ditto with Eveline Viens if she's going to play, because Eveline Viens brings a bit something different up front. She's gonna she's gonna be a bit more annoying. She's gonna want to run those channels constantly, be a bit of an ever present threat. I think for Canada, it's, again, there's this demand for the way they keep playing, and that's kind of why Sinclair did so well off the bench in the second game. They were kind of begging out for that sort of target player, and then she came in. In this game, they just really didn't. I think Australia did such a good job of shutting down their buildup that Canada didn't even get that far this game around. And in Ireland, it was almost like, okay, they were getting, some of those areas. They were just lacking some of that final product, that final ball, etc. Against Australia, they didn't even get that far. And I think that's where, Hoytema, Sinclair, they ended up kind of being completely, non-factors in that regard. And I think, going forward, you look at the way these players play, it's hard to look across at a lot of these players and be like, the deployment is right. So I think, it's going to be something where, for Hoytema in particular and everyone else around her, it's how can you get a system that suits them and gets the most out of them as players, because yeah, again, I don't know. I'd still stand out by the fact that Canada has quality. Like Hoytema is scoring goals in a what you could say is a pretty good league. OL Reign, a fair few players on the defending World Cup champions from OL Reign. Buchanan plays at a pretty good club. Ashley Lawrence plays at a pretty good club. Vanessa Gilles playing at one of the best clubs in the world. Fleming, Grosso. Like, I can't say you look at that group and not see talent, but the question is, did you get the most out of it? Absolutely not.
No, and when I look at this team, I'm assuming going forward, I'd like to see a shift to like a 3-5-2. Get the coverage, allow Quinn to sit just in front of the back three, gives Gross a little bit more space going forward along with Fleming. Utilize Ashley Lawrence, who I don't think she had a disappointing tournament, but I thought that she was such a player who could be a difference maker. And I saw her active in that first half against Nigeria. And other than that, she had a pretty quiet game. I think just playing that back four restricted her quite a bit, and then have a couple strikers up front playing off each other. But that's not really the time to talk about it right yet. But I do want to focus between the sticks with Sheridan, because she's obviously a fantastic keeper. There's no getting around that. But she had quite a poor tournament for her standards. What did you make of her two or three-ish errors that led to goals?
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise because usually, I mean, yeah, for San Diego, she's just a kind of a beacon of stability. And even for Canada, she'd been one of Canada's best players, say this year. Canada struggled this year, but even then, Sheridan had been a bright light for the most part. Had a bit of a, error against France, you could say. But other than that, she really saved their bacon against Brazil in their kind of lone preparation win, and had some good performances. And yeah, it was a bit surprised, but at the same time, I mean, that's kind of Sheridan, if that makes sense, because Sheridan's someone where you see that she brings you this world-class shot stopping. Sometimes she can be a bit, iffy, or, second guess herself with the ball at her feet, and that can lead to trouble. But I think really for Canada, it seemed like the other teams put a lot of pressure on Sheridan, and they Canada wasn't able to offer much resistance as well. Like the fact that there's a couple times on corners that teams were able to put balls right on top of her in the 18. It's something where Sheridan should be absolutely claiming those, no doubt. But also, I guess you wonder, okay, could Canada maybe have done a better job of just holding that six and boxing out and getting the right pattern? So yeah, I think it's something where Sheridan, she's kind of had that boom or bust about her sometimes in games where she can make three fantastic stops. Heck, she made a fantastic stop in this game when it was 1-0. It was early, and that could have really sunk Canada. But she just, other teams were able to put a lot more pressure. And I think I was surprised because Canada's defense was also uncharacteristically sloppy in the sense that they were allowing a few chances where you're like, okay, it is a bit high pressure, and maybe it did get to Sheridan a bit and kind of pushed her maybe to a level she hasn't really maybe seen as much with club and country recently.
Yeah, I didn't want to pick on Sheridan too much there, but I do rate her very highly. She's a very talented keeper, and I just thought a couple of those goals she definitely would want back. But Alex, I am going to pick up there on your you mentioning the defense and Kathy's comment here, and I feel like this is going to be the question of the stream. Alex, what worried you more either in this tournament or going forward? Canada's defense and how they were, because if we know during that Olympic gold medal, their defense was, the pillar of this team. It's what made them so good. Or their attack? Which one worries you more? Because the defense uncharacteristically sloppy throughout this tournament, but the front three, didn't matter what the combination was, it just couldn't create. So which one worries you more going forward?
Funnily enough, I think they both worry me because they all lead to the same factor, and that's Canada's build-up play. Because I think, for example, in this game, it was just like Australia again. It was they'd gotten the memo. It was sit back and frustrate Canada, and I think because of that, Canada shows that they just struggle to face a press. They also struggle to face a lower mid block, and because of that, it makes it hard for them to get the ball up. So then they're not getting their attack involved. And because of this game, for example, it was, if you think about it, if you watch the game back, I mean, I'd be curious to see the first 10 minutes. Probably completely confuse you because Canada only needs a draw. So in theory, Canada could be a team that'd be like, all right, take the ball, we're sitting deep, like break us down, because Australia needed a win to advance. Yet Australia was like, no, break us down. And all of a sudden, Canada had the higher line of engagement. Canada was the one trying to break down Australia, even though Canada only needed a draw. And then from there, they made some sloppy turnovers. All of a sudden, Australia was the one hitting them in transition when Canada was the one who needed to to hold on to the current score to advance. And I think that was key, because I think against Ireland, the same thing kind of happened. Canada got hit in transition. You're like, oh, okay. Ditto against Nigeria. They also got hit in transition. You're like, oh, this is a bit unusual. I think at the Olympics, what happened is Canada gave nothing in transition. They were, every game, Canada was almost like, you know what? And that was kind of what caught everyone by surprise. Like, you know what? We're going to sit behind the ball, because at the 2019 World Cup under Kenneth Heiner-Muller, he kind of wanted the team to be a bit more forward facing, you know, play out of the back, and they struggled. They weren't ready for that at the time. Priestman went back to, okay, we're just going to sit back behind the ball at the Olympics. They caught everyone by surprise. And every team in this group, Nigeria, Australia, Ireland, all asked Canada to break them down. And I think what we saw is when Canada's asked to do that, chances don't exactly come around all that often. And as we saw, maybe Canada has some issues with speed at the back that we maybe don't realize, because usually they're so good at defending one set that maybe in transition we kind of saw some moments that are, okay, maybe this team isn't really built to be playing as aggressively as they perhaps were at times, especially in a game like this where they only need to draw to advance.
Yeah, I was very surprised. Like you said, a draw. That's all we needed to do. This team was built to defend, and it's proven in the past that it's a recipe for success under Bev. So it was just very surprising to see that, you know, I mean, Australia, kudos to them, because they wanted Canada to play with it, and Canada just seemed happy to do so, and they just weren't able to create a thing. I mean, if you look at my takeaways, I had some at halftime. I don't remember where they all were, but it was basically the fact that we cannot break down this Australia side. They gave us the ball and we did absolutely nothing with it. And Australia looked deadly on the counter. They scored a goal that was marginally offside, but they had, like, I think 3 of the same kind of counterattacking goals and 1 off a set piece. Canada could not deal with it. They didn't know what to do with the ball. It goes to the midfield, it goes to the front 3. And it was just, I don't know if it was naive is the word, but it was just definitely a surprise that this is the way that Bev wanted to do it. Because how I was picturing this result going, if it was going Canada's favor, was literally a 0-0 draw. Try to give Australia the ball, sit back, be organized, defend the way that you know that you can, and hope that they can't break you down. And instead, because Australia gave Canada the ball and they kept going forward, the game was so open and just got caught multiple times. And Australia made it look so easy in transition. And it was just disappointing to see, because I thought that they could have played in the way that we probably thought and expected them to. But it led all the way back to the starting 11. It was just, the team wasn't maybe built to do that. They tried their own thing and it didn't work. And now they're bounced out after a 1-1 result, which is just tough to do. But from there, I mean, it's sad. We're going to go into the chat here a little bit. I'm going to pick out a comment. Any thoughts on that, playing open, Alex, and basically just falling into the Australian trap?
Yeah, I mean, it was just too predictable. I think that's the kind of the big thing. It was almost like, yeah, I was watching the first half, and it was almost like, you know, it's obviously it's hard as a Canadian to watch a performance like that, but it was almost like laughing, because I was like, it was a bit predictable in the sense that, like, Canada rolled out a very similar 11. They kind of tried to play through some of the issues that were already there in the other few games. You're almost like, if you're Australia, like, you're probably sitting there in the technical, like, if you look how excited Tony Gustafsson looked on the sideline. He was probably laughing, thinking like, oh, they completely, like, the film from the first 2 games, right? It was just, it was identical. It's like you could game plan to it, right, so to speak. Whereas maybe if Canada had thrown a bit of a wrench, he would have been sweating like, oh shoot, like, what's going on? Like, they kind of threw something a bit different at us. I think for me, that was a big thing as well for a coach, because it's like, it's one thing for Canada to go out and, yeah, I mean, it's something where we kind of talked about it after the last game. Could Canada potentially experiment, throw some new faces in, just, mix things around tactically? Of course, it's a huge risk, right? As a coach, it's a must-win game, must-draw game. You go safe in that sort of scenario, but it was something as well where if you go safe and you go predictable, you also open yourself up to, teams can just go at you and completely exploit you. And I think the fact that Canada decided to run back the same system with the same players, that was just something where it was too predictable, because with the same system and players, we saw where the coals were. But that's kind of what we said, right, last stream. Yeah, is this formation the best one for Canada right now? Probably not. But if you're going to play it, play Sophie Schmidt, play, player X and player B. And I think the fact that Canada kind of ran it back, it was just all too predictable for Australia. And I think they show that they're a good team. They can exploit what Canada was trying to do, and it was kind of obvious as the game went on, and it really made the game over by halftime, because it was just kind of like, what is Canada going to be able to adjust from here? Because it was already 2-0 at that stage, and it was like they needed to advance, and it was
Yeah, the four substitutions at halftime kind of spoke to how this starting 11 was not working. But Bev basically, in my eyes, played her hand in match one, and she had a system she wanted. She didn't really want to veer away from it, and she had the players that she trusted. So she went all in with this group. A lot will potentially not return. A few key pieces will retire, and we'll see what she does, how she changes this going forward as they look to take on the Reggae Girls. But there's a question here, and Alex, I'm curious to get your take on it. So the comment is that they thought that the Canadian women's national team was on the rise. This is a big setback for the program. I expected Canada to at least make it out of the group. With all due respect, this is a big failure. So the easy question for you, Alex, is this a big failure? Knowing that Canada obviously won gold at the Olympics, although Canada does not have a great history at the World Cup, and I also don't think everyone realizes how tough this group was. Alex, even before the tournament started, you and I talked about, and some people kind of deemed this the group of death. Like, Ireland is a good, stubborn team. That Nigeria team, like we mentioned, is not a 40th ranked nation. They're a very talented group. And Australia, obviously, even without Sam Kerr, the Matildas were absolutely up for it tonight. It is a tough group, but despite that, how do you rank this in terms of big failure, like he mentioned? Maybe just failure, disappointing. How do you rank it?
I'd say it's definitely in the failure category. I think it'd be unfair to paint it as anything such. And I think, fun enough, Christine Sinclair had some, very pointed and bang on comments really after, saying like, yeah, this was something where, given the talent, given this, level of staff, given everything, like, this team should not, be going out at this stage. And yeah, I think it's still absolutely something where, at the end of the day, Canada got fortunate also at the same time with the draw, because that was kind of the flip off we mentioned, I think, heading into it, because they got really unlucky with the draw, because Nigeria is a pot 4 team. That, again, I think that's wild that Nigeria was a pot 4 team, and they were kind of always going to punch above their weight in that regard. So I'm really not surprised Nigeria made it out of the group in the end. They have potential on paper, and they kind of put it together in a nice way, which was good to see from them. They went undefeated across the group stages. But also at the same time, like, Canada drew Australia in pot 1. Like, other than New Zealand, that's a pretty good draw, because you look at some of the other teams out of pot 1. You could, I don't know if they could have, but you could have got like a US. You could have got like some of these other teams in pot 1, Spain. You could have got some top European teams, France, Germany. Like, it's something where if anything, yeah, it's the host, but Australia, again, they didn't have Sam Kerr on the day as well today, right? Like, it's something where I think, given you're the Olympic champions, I think there was a great stat on the broadcast. Every Olympic champion had made it to at least the quarterfinals in the following World Cup. After you look at the group where it's overall, yeah, you take a Nigeria, but you trade it off with an Australia and an Ireland. You look at the level of this Canadian team, yeah, it's absolutely a failure. I think it's something where for them to get grouped like this, they should have absolutely done better. And it's something where, look, they could have lost in the round of 16. Absolutely, because you look at the potential matchups. It would have been likely England, or it would have been Denmark, depending on if they won the group or not. So the fact that they got grouped like this, why I think it is a disappointment. And it's something where Canada, yeah, if you want to be a top 10 tier 1 team, that just can't happen with you. And especially there's this trend of them not doing so well at World Cups, and those are your marquee tournaments. Those are your measuring sticks. We mentioned with the Olympics. The Olympics is great. It's a major tournament. It's great to win gold medals. It's a 12-team tournament where it lacks European opposition. And I think right now, as we're seeing the games taking huge steps forward in Europe, and I think the fact that Canada continues I think it's again, this Olympic cycle is going to be huge. And I guess heck, if things go wrong in the Olympics, because it's just 2 games, you never know what's going to happen. I'd say it's clear what needs to be fixed. So it's like, okay, can she fix that tactically? We'll see, because she came in with Canada and shifted things, got that balance right, and they won an Olympic gold. And then maybe she gets that balance a bit wrong and they get completely group staged. I think it's something where there's talent level, as they saw when you win gold. It is certainly better than what they showed this tournament. So yeah, I think it's something where I think she stays now, but I think the pressure is on her in the sense that, okay, you have this chance to find that next level and try to get the most out of the team. So it's going to be a lot of pressure for her in that regard.
Now, one player that doesn't look like she will be a part of Bev's future is Christine Sinclair, as it looks like she took some blades of grass before leaving the pitch and said that it's the end of the World Cup and I'm probably not going to play in another one. I'm leaving the pitch one last time in a World Cup. Alex, I mean, such a decorated career, 190 international goals, the most of any player, men or women. I know it's not easy to sum up, but what is the mark that Christine Sinclair has left on this program?
I mean, it's been everything. I think that's also the sad thing about a game like this is that it's just the wrong way for her to go out, really, right? Like, it just feels like plain wrong because one thing's for sure with Sinclair is that, I mean, she always brought her all, especially in these tournaments. Like, think of the time, heck, against, in 2011 against Germany, broken nose. Yeah, they didn't end up winning that game. She scores that free kick, right? Like, just there's moments where she just put this team on her back and, put so much. That's why it was so great to see Canada win the gold medal, because I think what you also saw that tournament was you just saw what it meant to her, and you saw how the team around her embraced her in that Olympic gold medal run, especially because her role was kind of reduced that tournament for the first time. Like, it was more 60-minute Sinclair. It was sometimes Sinclair didn't even start every game that tournament, and it was kind of like you saw this, what it meant to her to get that gold medal, finally get that major tournament after hearing so much of, oh, can Canada do it with Sinclair? Can she get it done at the international level? Now for her to go out like this, it's sad that, yeah, it was 45 minutes in a game where they just got absolutely throttled. And for someone who gave so much to the program, you would have loved her to go out in a hard-fought round of 16 match, a hard-fought quarterfinal, heck, something where you give it all on the field and you lose. Because, look, I think that's, again, another frustrating thing about this for Canada. And I think it kind of goes to the point of, maybe, at least for me, why this feels like a disappointment. Because, I mean, there are some good comments in the chat, Gord as well, pointing out, like, yeah, it's hard to say it's a failure when the groups are so close, right? Like, you see, teams like Germany are dropping points. Some good teams are dropping points. But it feels like for Canada, it wasn't a matter of them so much. Like, it wasn't so much of the other teams coming out there and showing their class and outplaying them, but it feels like a lot of Canada's pain was self-inflicted, if that makes sense, especially tactically. And I think that's the saddest thing about Sinclair's exit, is that with the kind of fighter, the kind of competitor that she was, if she was going to go out on a losing note, you'd want to see Canada kind of go out swinging. And the fact that they kind of just went out in a 4-0 loss like this, and that Sinclair was subbed out at halftime, it just feels wrong. And who knows, maybe she'll be playing in the fall and maybe retire after that, but the fact that will be her last World Cup, given she's played at 6 of them, she burst on the scene 20 years ago at one, that feels wrong.
Yeah, wrong's the word to use. She's had such an incredible career. If she ever does watch this, Christine, know that you have left this program in a much better place than when you first entered it. But hopefully you'll have a beautiful farewell game or something along those lines. But it is difficult. So if you guys are with us in the chat right now, be sure to drop a like on the stream. Get your guys' questions in. We're going to go through a bunch of them now. So if you have any questions about the tournament, Alex and I will get through them. I do want to focus just a little bit here, and I saw the question somewhere along the lines of can't score goals. But that's where I kind of want to look at, Alex. So going into this tournament, for me, the biggest question mark was, will this team be able to score goals? And it didn't. And there it is. Bottom line, they cannot score goals. 2 out of 3 games, they were shut out. Now, obviously, in the first match against Nigeria, there was a penalty that could have changed everything. If Christine Sinclair, unfortunately, if she would have scored that, it might have changed everything. We've been in a much better position going in that Australia match, but we weren't able to create. Besides that penalty, which I think was a little fortunate to get, we didn't create much in the Ireland game. A good fight back in that second half, but really struggled in the first. And then this Australia game was just super disappointing. The front three is a worry. So, Alex, I want you to quickly build a front three that you want to see this team hopefully build around for maybe the Olympics, for example. Like, if you were Bev, what would you look at to be your front three? Because she clearly puts loyalty in players. She likes playing. I mean, this one was Sinclair at striker, basically, with Adriana Leon and Jordan Hoytema out wide. That was her three in my eyes. So what would your three be going forward leading up to the next Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, It's tough because I mean, it's hard to say it's the front three that's
Yeah, I guess.
as much the issue. And I think really what I would say to counter it, it was just give informed players a chance is what I'd kind of say. Because again, for someone like for Canada who struggles to score, I find it just wild that someone like Eveline Vienne maybe got she got two subs off the bench and then a 45-minute start. Like there's someone who scored over 40 goals for country or for club over the last 1.5 seasons. 1.5 seasons, 40 goals. The Swedish league's a good league. I think up until last year, they still might be in like the top 5 leagues in terms of UEFA coefficients. Like that's goals, yet she can't get a sniff for Canada, right? Like you look at Chloe Lacasse, yeah, you can argue all you want the level of the Portuguese league. I think Lacasse showed her level when she kind of went out in Champions League and got a few goals against the likes of Barca and Bayern in that really tough group. Those are some, that's one of those, the current UEFA Champions League holders. Lacasse got the move to Arsenal. Like those are two very informed players, and they didn't get as much of a look. I think it's something where it's tough for because like an Adriana Leon, we kind of mentioned it last show. She's been reliable for Priestman. I think she has 10 goals under Priestman, I think, which is the most by any player, but also it's something where she wasn't really playing at club level. And you can see there's just moments where the form caught up to her, where she kind of fade out of games, or the touch would be a bit heavier. She just couldn't get involved as much. I think for Canada, it's okay. At a certain point, you gotta, you want to build something tactically, but you also got to reward some of these players in form offensively up front. And I think we just haven't seen that. And I think that's kind of what I want to see going forward. I think, for example, so today I'd say Lacasse and Viera in form, give them looks, go through growing pains. If they struggle in a game or two, work through it. Because I think also what we've seen, there's been a lot of players who have gotten second, third, and fourth chances up front with Canada and continue to get starts, whereas someone like Viera and Lacasse, they just haven't had that longer term opportunity. At this point, I have nothing to lose because at least they're scoring for their clubs, and you can hang on to the hope that maybe they score some goals for Canada, and even if they don't, at least you can say you tried and it was a failure. And I think that's something that's a bit frustrating to see, that you talk there's goals. Well, these players are scoring goals at the club level. Why don't you get maybe a bit more of a look with them?
Now, we sound like broken records, Alex. You and I have mentioned Vienne and Lacasse pretty much since day one. We thought that looking at the squad at their club level, these are the two players in the most form. I mean, hopefully going forward, maybe Bev will take a look at Lacasse playing in England, playing at that level consistently, and that maybe could be her in. But I heard Amy Walsh mention it on the broadcast as well, saying two players that are by far the most informed players in the attack at club level are having a real struggle to come in. And when they do come in, I mean, at least the class was making a bit of an impact. So it is difficult. Some coaches can kind of get a little tunnel vision where they have their eyes on the players that they want to play, and they kind of get focused on trying to make it work. So despite someone coming off the bench, they can't really see them. They're taking a look at the 11 that they want, and Bev just kind of, I'm going to push through it. I'm going to see if I can make it work. And I mean, despite not playing very well against Nigeria and a really poor half against Ireland, they ended up turning around and putting Bev and Canada in a very good position. So she went back to the trusted 11, and just in the last match, it didn't work for her. So it is difficult. We've seen many coaches, not just Bev, do it where they have their players, and if you're one of the outside looking in, it's difficult to get in. But two players that were not at this tournament, Alex, that we haven't talked about enough. I'm not saying that this is an excuse. Every team has got injuries and depth issues as well. But Janine Becky and Desiree Scott were two players that missed out on this tournament. How, in hindsight, I guess, how big of a miss were those two players? And do you think they could have changed the fortune of Canada if they were here?
Oh, I think they certainly could have. And I think it's Becky and Scott were missed both, of course, their ability. I mean, you can't deny that. But also how I think Canada replaced Becky and Scott was kind of a huge reason for how the tournament went, because I think they kind of asked players to fill in and be Scott and Becky. And I think you kind of saw how, for example, Becky, how crucial she's been to Priestman, where Priestman's kind of been able to go like, all right, Becky, one game you're playing right wing, you're playing left wing, you're playing right back, you're playing left back. And, Becky's just been able to put in some top performances like throughout. Like she's been so consistent under Priestman, where you kind of play her. I'm sure she played at center back. She'd be able to put up a decent shift. And then it was kind of like, okay, someone has to fill the shoes of Becky. And that's tough because, like, credit has to be given to, Becky for how she's been able to respond to that. And then for someone like Scott as well, it's been like, okay, the double pivot. Scott's been a rock. She's been so good defensively. You pluck someone like Grosso into that. And what is Grosso? The 10, the creator, the a bit more of a magician. And you're kind of like, well, that's big shoes to fill. And I think they just didn't go about replacing them the best way. Because look, you can't replace a Scott or a Becky. I think it's almost like, to use the Moneyball term, or something similar, you kind of have to replace them in the aggregate, right? You replace them in different ways. And I think the fact that they maybe asked some players to fit those shoes that didn't necessarily suit them, that kind of ended up being a downfall in the end, where we talk about tactically players not being in their best positions, et cetera. And I think that that's something that hurt Canada. And then,
Yeah, Trini Becky is she's just a great personality to have in the squad as well. She's so passionate, such a good player. She scored some bangers as well. I mean, again, it's hindsight, but it just shows how important of a player that both her and Scott are. This is the next comment. Haven't seen anything mentioning Buchanan. I want to focus on Buchanan here. I don't think Revere was terrible by any stretch, but I do want to focus on Buchanan because, again, I rate Kadisha Buchanan as a world-class defender. I mean, she's got a glorious career. She did so well at Lyon, winning multiple Champions Leagues, going to Chelsea now, had a bit of an up and down season. But I thought this tournament, for me, Buchanan at times just could not get her decision-making done. And now I don't know if it's because, how we mentioned already, the build-up play just wasn't there for Canada. They didn't know what to do with the ball. But the amount of times, and I tried to count today, and I honestly just end up losing count. But throughout this tournament, I don't know how many times that Kadisha Buchanan had the ball, took a look around her, didn't know what to do, and then she just punted it upfield to pretty much no one, and it's just turned and right back down her throat. What do you think went behind us playing out of the back like that? Do you think that Buchanan just wasn't comfortable, didn't know exactly what to do? Do you think she just like, all right, I'm frustrated. I've tried playing out a few times. It hasn't been working. I can't find these patterns of play, so I'm just going to punt it upfield. What was it? Because this was a trend I saw right from the Nigeria match until the very end. And I would say, I don't know, but so, I mean, someone wants to go through and count all the time she punted it upfield, but I'd say maybe she did 30, 40 times and maybe 5 or 6 worked.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can almost lump Ashley Lawrence into this. She's, again, another someone who is usually very good in the build-up and just couldn't get anything going. I think it was a big surprise just to see the way Canada was building out, and especially Buchanan is someone where even what I was almost expecting is that she'd almost expect her to go 1v1 at times, because she's shown this ability to dribble and kind of force a defender to commit and then open up a line to break the pass. But it just felt like Canada was too disconnected in possession. It just kind of felt like every line was off, and it kind of led to these moments where it was, you kind of almost out of frustration, you end up hitting. And I think the stat that really summed it up for me, I mean, I don't know if it got any better in the end, but I think at halftime, it did get slightly better. But at halftime, Canada had completed 7 out of, I think 35 of their long balls in the first half, which is just, a horrific stat in terms of how Canada was struggling to get anything forward on the long ball, because they kept going to that. And yeah, I mean, I think it's something where Buchanan, Lawrence, it was a surprise to see them struggling. I think it was as much tactical, because we see it for clubs when they're put in these roles to help. They can really be useful in the build-up play, and they kind of just got pinned back and struggled. And certainly did not look like Buchanan was 100%, but even then it felt like there were moments where she was just kind of almost sitting out there like lost. Like you could see the frustration on her face at times, or she'd be putting her hand up like, what is going on? Like, where's the movement? What's going on in front of them? And it felt like it's as much tactical as it was going on individually.
Now I'm bringing up Jenkins' tweet here because he is looking to, add a little salt in that wound there. But Jenkins said, "Look, I know this is going to sting that we laid such an egg on such a big match, but he doesn't see how we can be favored in a home and away tie against Jamaica." And we even got a comment, "Can or can't?" And Jenkins doubled down and said, "Can be." That basically Jamaica is a hybrid of Nigeria and Ireland. I don't see what change will be made in 6 weeks. What do you make of Adam's comment? Do you think Canada, I mean, the Reggae girls are having quite the tournament. I'm just going to be curious to see the way that final match works out for them, and they can build on that confidence and somehow make it to the knockouts. But do you agree with that take from Adam? Do you think that Canada will be the favorites or won't be the favorites in their upcoming 2-leg affair with Jamaica?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say they will be at the current state, because, yeah, I mean, obviously we have to see what ended up happening with Jamaica. But I mean, Jamaica got drawn into a pretty tough group with France, Brazil, Panama. And I mean, the fact that they went out and drew France, very good French side. That Jamaica looked solid. They beat Panama. They kind of put themselves in a good position against Brazil. They just need a point to get through. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's something where for Canada, yes, especially it's home and away, right? That's going to be, I think the away leg could end up being very tough for Canada because especially this Jamaican team, as we've seen, like they're fit, they can cause problems with their, their work off the ball. Some of that athleticism that's going to be exposed in an away leg, say in like a Kingston, for example. Can Canada even get back to a home leg in a good position? And even then, I think it's good that there's a home leg. Maybe that will help Canada just because I haven't played at home as much over the last few years. But yeah, I'd say it's something where, especially if Jamaica makes it out the group, you can make the argument that they are the favorites. And or at the very least, I think it'd be split because you could at least go, oh, Canada's the defending Olympic champions. Maybe they just had a rough tournament. But based on how Jamaica's playing, it's hard to say that Canada would be the overwhelming favorites in any circumstance.
Now, this has been a very tough start to 2023 for Canada. They were in really poor form going into this World Cup. The off-the-field issues as well didn't add anything there. So going into this, Alex, considering we are the defending Olympic champions, do you think if Canada can't find a way to qualify for the Olympics that it would be an all-time low? That we would hit rock bottom if we find a way, and then maybe serious questions need to be asked?
Yeah, I think that it would be it would be low just because Canada's dominated the Olympic tournament. So it's like going from defending Olympic champions to not in the tournament altogether would be viewed as a disappointment, especially right after being grouped for the World Cup. And yeah, I think it would be all-time low because then you have 3 years of just sitting on your thumbs, right? Because it's like even more. You have 4 years of sitting on your thumbs because you wouldn't have anything for 2024. You'd have a Gold Cup, Copa America hybrid that they're doing because the 2024 Gold Cup is going to have, I think, 3 or 5 invitees from South America. So that'll be, at least Canada will have that. Then other than that, it's going to be a lot of nothingness until the 2027 World Cup. Like that would be a huge failure to be, go from winning an Olympic gold in 2021 that your next 2 major tournaments, you get grouped and you miss. And it just kind of, like that's, especially you look at the ages of this squad, right? Like Kadisha Buchanan, very much in her prime. That's someone where by the time the next World Cup comes around, she'll be pushing 30. Like next major tournament, it's going to be one where it's her in smack dab in her prime, like a chance to go out and win another, major honor, ditto with some of these players in that 25, 26, 27, 28 range. Some of them are going to be in their 30s by the time that 2027 World Cup comes around. So yeah, I think it would just be a huge miss in the sense that it would feel like a rock bottom, given that you'd be without any major tournament soccer for so long.
I didn't want to scare anybody. I just wanted to paint a picture of how important that this 2-leg affair is with Jamaica, because there is a lot to play for. It is very important after this disappointing result. The off-the-field issues, the way that Canada even performed in 2023 so far, they need this. They need to find a way to get these players to click in whatever system that Bev is going to do going forward, and that there's something very important to play for, because when we won gold, there's plenty of Canadians, mostly soccer fans, but I mean, it really grabbed the nation when they won that gold medal. And hopefully most Canadians out there can tell you exactly where they were when they won gold, because it was such a beautiful moment, especially for a legend like we talked about with Christine Sinclair, and just a group of very talented players that had 2 back-to-back bronze medals followed up by the gold. They changed the color, and it would be criminal not to be able to see them go back and defend their title. So to end off this with the last 10 or so minutes we have on the stream, we're going to try to turn things on a more of a positive note. I think Alex and I spent basically 50 minutes talking about how much we struggled basically throughout the tournament, but especially how we didn't really deserve to go through in this match. But there's still a lot to keep an eye on this team, and hopefully they can finish 2023 in a very different note than the way that they started. So Alex, what we're going to do, because we did it for the other stream so far, is we're going to build a starting 11, but we're going to build a starting 11 for the Jamaica match. Now I know it's hypothetical, but what do you want to see? And I think it's important to see which players you want to see maybe go out, maybe whether they're retiring or maybe just take a step back, maybe as a substitute. But I want you to build me your what you would do. So you can be as creative as you want. I usually hold you back. Before we start recording, say, Alex, think of what Bev would do and try to make it realistic, and it really upsets Alex. So today I'm giving you full range. You can make the predicted starting 11, how you would see it, how you want to see this team maybe switch towards, because it is important. There's no getting around it. These matches against Jamaica are important, but it is time maybe after this kind of wake-up call that this team needs some changes. So, Alex, let me pull it up, and what would you do? Formation first.
Oof. I mean, I think certainly at a point, might it be time for the back three? I don't know. Maybe that is bold, but I feel like for Canada, I mean, certainly the same status quo isn't going to cut it. So I feel like we should at least, mess around with some back three of sorts.
So do you like the 3-5-2? That was the one system I thought, just because, again, you could have Fleming, Grosso in there, and that it could maybe work a little bit better with Quinn sitting above a back three, give Lawrence a little bit more room as well. Do you like
it's not like a 3-1-4-2 kind of vibe? I think the only thing is I think what's clear is that Grosso, Fleming should be your midfield, but they should also be advanced. So I think the only thing is I don't want him to get stuck in a double pivot in a 3. So like could a 3-1-4-2 where you have a 6 behind them work? And because again, Fleming and Grosso can kind of both play as 10s, so that gives you the creativity. You get 2 strikers up front. So I'd say just like this, but maybe invert that midfield triangle and make it a.
Sorry, so you said like a
3-1-4-2.
3-1-4-2. Gotcha. Yes.
Something like that.
All right.
And then Grosso and Fleming can kind of be the freedom to get 2 10s. You get your wing backs kind of going forward, and I think that's something where through that as well, like you have options at wing back. Lawrence, Riviere, Becky when back fit. I don't think she'll make it in time for the Olympics. She said she won't. Well, she won't make it back in time for the Olympic qualifiers, but something where if you can kind of get the seeds rowing when she's back, she could fit in that formation. I think there could be some options there.
So I'm assuming you want Lawrence out at left wing back, gives her the opportunity to get further up the pitch, which is what I wanted to see. I thought, again, I mentioned it a lot. I thought she was going to have a big tournament on the offensive side of things, but she just did not get involved as much. And I think this tactical change could hopefully help her do that. Who would you like to see on the right then? Assuming that Becky's not available then.
Yeah, I'd say, Becky would have been the first choice. If not, go Riviere.
I
think Riviere, she had a solid tournament, all things considering, right? Like, I think for her, a lot of the times in games, it was like she mostly held her own in some tough 1v1 duels, and showed that she can defend. And she's someone who can get forward. And I think considering she's coming off a pretty major injury, like she looked solid out there. So I think Riviere could also would be a good shutout wing back.
Now the back three, how do you want it to form, and who do you want playing centrally? I'm assuming Buchanan's going to be your central center back, a little bit better passing, even though I thought she had a tough tournament, but she is probably the central center back. Then who are you going to have flanking her?
Yeah, there's 3 options, because I think, I guess depending on the health, I'd actually go for a back 3 of Jade Rose, Vanessa Gilles, and Kadisha Buchanan, and I'd probably put Buchanan in the middle with Jade Rose on the left and Gilles on the right. But also, if you don't think Jade Rose is ready, you could also put Zadorsky in the middle. She's a very good passer. But I'd say if you're looking to build that next generation, Jade Rose was also someone who was very missed and could have been used in a few games where Canada's center backs looked a bit shaky. We didn't see, you kind of didn't really have that option. Because Rose's, I think, athleticism was something where we talked about Canada struggling a bit in transition. Jade Rose showed it last year when she played her. She can keep up with the speed of players, but she's also very good on the ball. And man, she's just someone, she needs to go pro. I think it's something where with her skill set, if she can get some reps in a top pro environment, she's going to be someone to look forward to for that next cycle. And that's where we talk about there being young players to watch out for. Jade Rose. Simi Awujo didn't see the field this tournament. Maybe she should have, because we talk about the future in midfield. Heck, maybe she's someone we could look at the 6 option as a bit of a fun squad option. But yeah.
I like the Rose shout. She looks so calm on the ball. That one assist that she had was just fantastic. The way that she just kind of used her body, ran up the field, that nice little shake and bake there, and then put in a beautiful ball. Just looked calm and cool. And I would like to see her go pro. I totally agree. And she could definitely be an option there just to give that back three a little bit more stability, because it seems like this Canadian side lost their way a little bit, because when you are sturdy defensively, it gives you the opportunity to go forward and hopefully nick something, or just simply be able to see out a game, which this back four didn't really look like they were able to do this tournament. So Moving up to the 6, then you mentioned Awujo. Do you want to go with her? Do you want to go with
No,
Quinn?
I think for Olympic qualifiers, you go Quinn, right?
Quinn.
But I think what's nice is with something like that, you could kind of have a situation where Quinn's there, maybe Scott's lurking on the wings, kind of playing a mentorship role. Because I mean, Schmidt sounds like she'll retire, and then what's nice is I think Awujo could be a very nice replacement to kind of have push Quinn, and if Awujo can win the spot from Quinn, great. If not, Quinn, I think is still a very. I mean, we see it at club all the time. Quinn can do a job for you at the 6, can be very good on the ball, and I think again some of their struggles this tournament was as much the setup around them as it was them.
All right, so I fill out the other midfielders because you
Yeah.
kind of mentioned earlier, Grosso, Fleming, no surprise there. Now for the front 2, how and who do you want to see going forward? We have a lot of options. I mean, it's difficult because we played with wingers throughout this tournament, so it's difficult not to see that front 3. But one of my biggest takeaways throughout this entire tournament was that the front 3 clearly did not click, but you can play certain players in that position. Like I'm just hypothetically, I know Hoytema can play in the front 2. You can have her up there with a VN. You can throw Adriana Leon up there. You can even have Lacasse playing under. Good creative player in front of a striker. So what do you want to see going forward in a dual strikership?
Yeah, I mean, I'd go right now Hoytema Vian, just that they're in form, and I think there's enough difference in profiles, especially if you're playing wing backs. One thing that was obvious this term is that Canada's wide service was also just not that great. I think if you can get the wing backs up, that can hopefully help with some of that wide service that Hoytema thrives on, and then Vian can offer you a bit of that threat in behind. And then from there, you could also modify in different ways. I think a Hoytema Lacasse or a Vian Lacasse, Leon can kind of play up front as well. Rose, Prince. I think you kind of get something there, because I think, look, for Canada, my issue this tournament wasn't as much the final third, because they struggled to get the ball in the final third, and I think by having that extra body, to play out the back with, that extra body in midfield, so you go from a 4-3-3 to a 3 and a 4. I think that would hopefully help those issues, and then that would allow a Vienna Hoytema to thrive, because I think what's clear, as much as Hoytema and Vienna maybe didn't take an opportunity, they also didn't get any chances, and I think hopefully a formation like this could get a bit more out of them. So I wouldn't mind seeing Vienna, what a Vienna Hoytema front 2 would look like if they're getting wide service from wingbacks.
I totally agree, and I'm glad we kind of ended on more of a positive note, because there is a ton of quality in the starting 11. You can't look at the clubs in the history that these players have, the amount of caps they have, the players that were involved in the gold medal. There is talent in this team. There's young talent in this team. It just seemed like something was just a little bit off. And if you just tailor that system a little bit, just to walk through the way that you talked about, Alex, a 3-player a back 3 basically allows, I think, key. It allows Grosso and Fleming to push up a little bit. Where we talked about Grosso getting caught, there's many times throughout this tournament we saw Grosso deeper than Quinn, which is just not playing to her ability. It just gives that extra coverage back there. And if it's Rose, whoever it may be, like we talked about, but it just allows, I think, the midfield to free up a little bit, and it also allows the wingbacks to go up. And I sound like a broken record, but Ashley Lawrence is a crucial player for this team. We need to play her to the best of her abilities, and I think a back 3 would allow her to do that. And if it is Jade over on the right, or if it's Becky, she comes back. Like Becky has shown that she can play in this role, like Alex mentioned, right back, left wing back, right wing back, winger. She can play just about everywhere, but I think that would be a good role for her in this system. Allows the freedom to go forward, knowing that the coverage is there. Because you saw it today, playing in that back 4 going forward, when we tried to, Australia gave us the ball and we tried to get players up, we got caught consistently. And if you want an Ashley Lawrence to be at her best, she needs to have that coverage behind her. And if she does get caught, you have a Jade Rose, Buchanan, Gilles at the back line along with Quinn in there. I like that a lot. And then the key is also getting Grosso and Fleming, because these are 2 players you can build around going forward. And if you have Grosso slipping down into that double pivot, we've seen it throughout this term. You're not going to get the best out of her. So I like everything. It's just a quick little tactical change that allows these players to kind of slot into their preferred position. I do still have some question marks about the front 2. Looking at this, I think it looks very balanced. It's just a question marks is whether that they can deliver. Jordan Hoytema is a talented player. Maybe a dual striker partnership with an Evelyn Van or whoever it may be could get something more out of her, a little more production. But I think her height could definitely be used. If Route 1 doesn't work, you always have that aerial presence from her, even though I don't think that's the way that we should play. But I definitely think for Canada's success going forward, they need to find a way to put the ball in the back of the net. It's as simple as that. And hopefully that this duo can work, because the front three throughout this tournament and even basically throughout 2023 has not been working. So it could be Lacasse, Hoytema, Vienne, whoever it may be, but I really like the look of this team, and maybe it's something that Bev plays with going forward.
Yeah, I think that would be key, because what I'd like about it is it would seem that I think it would get a lot more out of some of these players now. So like, again, you get Lawrence Riviere up the field. That was a problem all tournament. They were stuck deep, and they're good attacking fullbacks. Grosso and Fleming playing in front of a six. Boom. I mean, we've been banging that drum. Vienne, Hoytema getting more support through those wide areas, maybe being able to play off each other, kind of being able to do more of their thing. Boom. That's another box ticked. You got support. Whereas if, say, Lawrence and Riviere get caught high up the field, you have a number 6, and Rose and Gilles are pretty decent athletes on the outside of a back three. Buchanan as well, usually for the most part as well. Those 3 solid, speedy center backs. I think Jade Rose as well, that she was someone where, just missed. And I think what's nice is that there's potential for the future. I think Rose, again, she's someone I'm excited about for that next cycle, for sure. Absolutely. You look at some of the other players as well. I mean, at center back, I'm sure more names will emerge. You look at that 6, Simia Wujo's waiting in the wings. Like, that's someone where if she can take that step forward, she will be a force. And I'm sad we didn't even see her in this World Cup stage, because I think she really could have shown, or not shown as much, because it's not a lot to ask her, but she could have really at least, shown her level and whatnot. And up front, I mean, there are some interesting attacking talents coming through the younger age group. So I think there's also some room to maybe grow in this formation. Heck, and grow in it long term. I think it's something as well where if Canada's going to modernize and go to that next level and they play this back three, what's nice if they grow with it, they can kind of set themselves up for a Wujo-like situations where Wujo can take over a Quinn's role, and maybe some wing back will come up, can take over one of the wing backs up front. Like, there's kind of that room for growth within it as well. But I mean, we're looking at that team. I think everyone there, they're all under 28, right? That's actually a pretty young team as well. Like, it's not something where it's like, you're looking sitting there like, there's one player that's going to be over relied upon. Yeah, Buchanan, a bit older at 28, but that's still someone where, given the way she plays, you could easily see her in the next World Cup. I think and you can say that for everyone. I don't think there's anyone in there who will not be at that next World Cup, and I think that's good because you can build something and hopefully get some continuity.
Yeah, and in that back three, if that's the way Bev goes, I mean, if you're asking me right now, I can't really see her changing. I'm afraid if she will stay kind of tunnel visioned on that 4-2-3-1, and again, just try shoehorning players in, because what we're building around is the players that we just saw, and they don't really fit that system. I think there's a lot that they do fit in this back three. You even have a Gabby Carl, who I know that you rate very highly, Alice, who can slide in there on that outside left center back as well. There's definitely options to play this system. And yeah, I mean, and it just gave me the thought of it as well, is that at times that front three, who I thought just struggled a lot. I always liked Lacasse when she came on because she was direct. You saw moments where the wide players were just very quiet. They weren't able to combine. And if maybe you make them a little bit more narrow, playing in a dual striker, which Adriana Leon can also play in. Hoytema, like we said, can play in. Vienne, who's a goal scorer. Lacasse can play under. And then you got that creativity, allowing Grosso and Fleming to go up the pitch a little bit more. Maybe that 4 player right there can kind of create something, which we've definitely struggled to do. It's worth trying, I think. Whether Bev will do it or not, we don't know. But that is all the time we have on our morning of stream. Unfortunately, there will not be another one for this World Cup because Canada have been bounced out. So the next time you'll see Alex and I for a morning after, whatever it may be, stream is probably for the Jamaica match and then for the men's national team, but I don't know what matches they even have scheduled right now for the September window. So Alex, final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a pleasure. It's always, you can never take watching your country play in a World Cup for granted, and but bittersweet that's kind of the way they went out. Especially your heart goes out to legends such as Christine Sinclair and Sophie Schmidt, and it's going to be strange to maybe see them in a World Cup in 4 years and not have those pillars that have just been so iconic for Canada. But curious to see what's next for this team, because certainly lots of questions in terms of tactics, in terms of the Olympic qualifiers coming right up, in terms of just young players. Can this team really, can Jade Roses and Simia Wujo's take that next step up? Can this really become Fleming Grosso's team, Buchanan, all these players' teams? Lots to look forward to in that regard. And ultimately, I think the big thing is you just want to learn from this, because I think it's something where a World Cup like this showed the world is catching up quickly. Canada's going to have to be careful. But at the same time, if you can learn from these mistakes, and maybe if you're better off for it in 4 years and you end up doing better and you put the game in a better place, then it will, at least you can look back, be like, yeah, it was a tough low, it was a tough moment, but they learned from this. You just hope that this isn't the start of anything new. And I mean, we'll just leave on the optimism that hopefully they can use this as a bit of a catalyst, a bit of a learning moment, and at least make sure that the legacy of this tournament ends up having effect down the road.
Absolutely, because I want to stress this. Keep an eye on this national team, because those matches against Jamaica are very, very important. Much love to Schmidt and Sinclair. Unbelievable careers. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to drop a like on your way out. Drop a sub if you're new around here, and we will see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.